What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How to Get Away with the JD. I know it's been a little minute, so Happy New Year if that counts. I know it's February, whatever. Okay, my bad. I took a little break, right? But today, and Happy Black History Month. So I had to wear
Ooh,
I
happy
had to
Black
wear the
History
shirt.
Month.
Yeah,
Yes.
wear the shirt to let them know what it is. We're back with an all new episode. I have the lovely Brooke Bishop, Esquire. Had to throw that out there, let the kids know what we're dealing with today, slight flex. Here to talk to you guys about an important topic that I think a lot of people don't think about in terms of the admissions process, what they want to do if they want to go to law school, and that is the part-time evening route. If that is something that for some of my listeners who you're probably on the fence, not really sure what to do, Brooke is here to talk us a little bit through her journey, what she liked, what she didn't like, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself, and then we are going to get started.
Well, hi everyone. Like the lovely introduction already mentioned, my name is Brooke Bishop. I recently graduated from St. Louis University, and like Phelan mentioned, I was in the part-time evening program. So first off, that meant I was on a 4-year track instead of a 3-year track. It took me 4 years to complete, plus a couple of summer sessions. I graduated there with concentrations in intellectual property and entrepreneurship. Shortly after, I set for the Missouri July bar, which is a UBE bar. In hindsight, I'm super happy it was in person, although we were really nervous about that at the moment, rightfully so, being in a pandemic. But I've also heard horror stories of virtual bars that have occurred. And one of the huge perks of being UB is that you can transfer within different states. So I say all that to say, yes, I sat for the Missouri bar, passed that. So, yes, I am now an Esquire officially. I currently practice civil litigation in a small firm in Missouri.
Oh yeah, nice little resume run off right there. I love it. I love it.
Just a little bit.
Sprinkle it for the kids. Sprinkle it for the kids. So, Brooke, first question out the gate. You already talked 4 years, 4-year program versus 3-year program. What are your thoughts looking back on it now? How did the 4 years affect you either in a positive way or in a negative way?
Yeah, so I definitely think having 4 years as opposed to 3 years, it gives you a little bit more opportunities to try to get a lay of the land, figure out, okay, who should I network with? Who would be possible good mentors? I like this. I don't like this. It's kind of spread out a little bit more. I feel like a misconception would be, okay, you have a lighter course load. Yes and no. Technically, I was taking less credit hours than a full-time student, but usually you're in the evening program for a reason. So for me, I was working full time in retail management. So alone, imagine the holidays. You got Black Friday, Christmas. My boss in my full time job doesn't care that I was in law school, although he did care. He was wonderful and he always praised me for being able to do both. But what I mean by that is the business itself. I still have to be there Black Friday, and that's usually a time when most law students, like, you can study during Thanksgiving break for your finals. So I'm juggling both. So although the course load was a little bit lighter, your life isn't lighter. Arguably, it's sometimes a little bit fuller. So yeah, I guess that was the benefit of it. Like, you do have more time to learn more, but like I said, the negative is you're probably juggling more things. Um, and I'm sure we'll get into it in more details. But as far as comparing it to the full-time students that were doing 3 years, I do feel like I missed out on certain opportunities just by being able to be there during the day. Even though they have less time with 3 years, they're also doing a lot more in the legal community right off the bat. So
Okay, I'm glad you said something about that. So we gonna dive into it, right? So I was on the internet trying to be somewhat prepared, like a good law student or whatever, doing our little research, our due diligence, and I came across an article from Barbary talking about being a part-time law student, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
yes.
So they broke it down into the 3 different tiers. So for the good, they said a good thing for it is a career upgrade. So a lot of people are looking to, either transition from one thing that they're currently doing or life in general. And so they want to upgrade their careers, and being a part-time student gives you that flexibility, like you were just talking about, with your schedule, depending on what your life looks like. And then they also said, and this is where it gets a little sticky, it could also be a less of a financial burden. Now, depending on how you look at that, I mean, 4 years, you have the opportunity to spread out, like different payments and things. But then on the flip, something that they mentioned in the bad is that you're probably going to miss out on some scholarship opportunities, because a lot of law school scholarships are focused on students who go full-time, straight out the gate, knock it out in 3 years or whatever. So depending on what your financial obligations are, part-time may be better for you versus full-time, or full-time might be better for you versus part-time. It also depends on, like you were talking about, jobs and how you juggle that, what your boss feels, other things of that nature. And then they also mentioned, like the good thing of good company, typically nighttime students are a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less, I want to choke you
Yeah.
out. So, I mean, depending on what you're looking for, that might be the move for you. But like we were just talking about, in the bad, the first thing that they say is missed opportunities, right? And they pretty much say, as a part-time student, there will be certain opportunities that will not be available to you. That includes student orgs, clinics, law review, or other academic honors. And then, career services hours don't necessarily cater to part-time evening students, because they're probably out the door no later than 5 p.m., depending on what your time zone is or whatever. So you're missing out on a lot of the quote unquote structure and normalcy of what a law school experience is supposed to be. And then they also say that the other bad is it is a lot of work. So whether that is coursework, because you are still doing like the 30, 40 hours that a full-time student is doing, but you're also juggling life, job.
Yes.
If you got kids, you're juggling the kids. If you got a spouse, you're juggling the spouse. Like, it's just life on top of this. And it's just like, right. And then they mentioned in the ugly, which I think could have also been in the bad, it's going to take a while, 4 years. I mean, depending on how you look at it, realistically, it's really not that bad. It's like another stint in undergrad, really.
Right.
And then you have the potential to burn out. But as a full-time student, I can also say you have the potential to burn out. So, I mean, it is what it is. But what are your thoughts on that list in terms of what they're talking about, from your experience, for real, about what it looks like to be the good, the bad, and the ugly of a part-time
For
student?
sure. So you ran through a very thorough list. So I'll try to remember some of the specific points you mentioned and talk about my specific experience. But I mean, hey, if I miss some stuff, let me know. Definitely. If it's like, okay, but what about this part? So as far as the good goes, like you mentioned, it gives you the opportunity to pursue your JD if you have life. So you listed a lot of the things. You can be married. You could have kids. You might not be financially able to take another 3 years off after undergrad, not really working a job and just going full on into school. So I appreciate that certain schools do offer the part-time evening program, because it allows you to do that. So for me specifically, after I graduated from Mizzou undergrad, that's where I met you. I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do, like a lot of people. I commend anyone who goes into their bachelor program. They know what they want to do, they accomplish it, and they're still on that path. I more so went because that's what you're told to do, to be afforded better opportunities than your parents or your grandparents. You go to school, you get this degree, and then you go on with your life. And you don't really get the details of how much harder that is actually doing it versus saying it. Also, you're making a lot of these decisions when you're 18. So I say all that to say I graduated, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of stumbled into retail because I had a few friends who were managers at the time. And they said, hey, we're looking for additional managers. At that time, it was Finish Line, apply for the role. I can get you through the beginning interviews. Then you just have to impress other bosses, district managers, blah, blah, blah. No problem. Like, usually for me, at least, once I get in the interview, I can kind of finesse, I'm very charismatic, get my way through the door, even though I had no retail experience. So it worked out well for me. I was able to become a retail manager, but I quickly realized, okay, this could be potentially a very lucrative career, but it's not for me in the long period. I don't want to retire for this. So what are the other options? And I was actually having a conversation with my mom. So shout out to my mom. She mentioned at that time, I think I was maybe 24. She said, you're not married yet. You don't have kids. You can be selfish with your time. If you want to go back to school, go back to school. If you want to do it full time, do it full time. If you want to burn yourself at both ends and work full time and go to school, like, you can do it, because sacrificing sleep, who is that affecting? Just you. So I'm like, okay, you're right. And honestly, I just made the move to go back to law school because that was something I had thought about in the past, but didn't really put that much into it. And it sounds crazy to say, I don't necessarily advise this particular part of my law school career, but I just got an LSAT book from Amazon, like kind of studied, because in my mind it was now or never. If I keep putting this off, because it had already been a few years since graduation, exactly, it's like now or never. So I'm going to study enough to pass the LSAT to get an acceptable score, and then that's it. So that's what I did. I kind of taught myself. In hindsight, would I recommend that once again? No, I'd tell other people, try to get that tutor. If studying isn't your strong suit, get the different flashcards, reach out to different mentors and stuff that early on, so you're that much better prepared. But I just didn't do that because, like I said, I was already working full time in retail, and I was just trying to prep for the future. So, so the good thing about the part-time evening program was I was able to keep my full-time job. I was able to still sustain my living, like pay for my rent, pay for my utilities, all of those things. I know you mentioned one of the bad parts that were on the list where you do miss out on a lot of opportunities. You don't have those office hours. What I will say, at least at SLU, the good part of it was most people were understanding that if you're in the evening program, it's for a reason, whether it's for work, family, whatever. But at the same point in time, it's like, you're crazy enough to do this. So I feel like you won't waste my time. If you want me to stay longer in the day, I will. So a lot of people were super welcoming and helpful with, hey, I know my office hours are normally at 5, but I can either come in later in the day and stay later, or just work a longer day. I can even meet you at the coffee shop up the street on a Saturday if that suits you. Whatever you need, I'm here to help. Now, the caveat to that is the door is always open, but for me specifically, being first generation, and I also didn't have people in my back pocket that were already in the legal community. Sometimes those doors could be open, but if I don't know what questions to ask, I'm not going to ask them. So that kind of hits on the good and the bad part. Like, it was good that a lot of our professors and the admissions and faculty staff, they were willing to stay later for us and help us. But the bad part was even just having that casual conversation in the hallway with other full-time students, or being able to go to the lunch hours where you're sitting on the panel and stuff. I didn't have that experience. So there were a lot of questions or answers I didn't have until much later on in my career, because normally for part-time evening, so I will go from work directly to school. I'm starting class from like 5 to 9 p.m. or sometimes 10 p.m. So yeah, looking back, I don't see how or why I did it, or a lot of my other friends, but hey, it is what it is. But so that was another bad part. If you're first generation going into it, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. Another bad part you mentioned with the scholarships, yes and no. If you're applying for a lot of scholarships with particular firms or certain organizations outside of that school, correct. Normally, they will only offer scholarships for full-time students. There are certain scholarships that are offered for part-time students as well, but it's few and far between. But usually if the school offers that program, they're going to offer scholarships specifically for that. So I can speak for at least myself. I did get a small partial scholarship, and it sustained me for those 4 years. But it was because it came directly from the school. So, it's like, how do you offer this evening program, but you don't offer the scholarships for it? So yes, another good part is, like you said, financially, I'm able to sustain my own life and pay a little bit for my bills, even though my student loans are still crazy. Doesn't seem like I made a dent compared to somebody else. I might have less because I was working a full-time job. And depending on the company you're working for, and specifically, even if you plan on staying with that company and you're just doing this to transition into the legal department, they might offer you stipends as well. So that's another way to kind of cut into costs. So there are a lot of corporations, they offer maybe like, it could only be $1,000 a year or 5,000 or 10,000, whatever it is, though, they offer this amount of money for you to continue your education, as long as, of course, you're working for them while they're paying for that. I've heard, I didn't experience it, but I've heard other corporations, you have to work for them past your graduation, depending on how much they give. My job didn't require that. It was just like, as long as I submit my transcript, they're like, hey, you get this money for the year. So that kind of cuts into the things with scholarships as well. And although it kind of is really bad to say, but realistically, not everyone gets scholarships anyway, no matter how many times you apply for it. So, I mean, if that's your one thing, like, well, I have to go full-time versus part-time because of the scholarship, you may or may not be missing out on what you would have received anyway. I kind of already touched on this, but I definitely think a bad slash ugly was just the fact that I didn't know going into it, me being a first generation student and not having prior legal knowledge. I didn't really know simple things such as even OCIs are not only important, but they're important after your first semester. I was going off of the mindset of an undergrad. A lot of people, they're not checking for you until maybe your sophomore, junior year, when you have a little bit more knowledge, just book knowledge alone. So it took me a little bit to get adjusted to law school, but on top of me taking a little bit longer to adjust, I didn't know, like, this first semester is crucial. And I think had I been in the even daytime part-time, people compare that to full-time because you have a lot of the same experiences. I feel like even if I was daytime or if I was full-time, I would have just picked up little tidbits here and there just from casually speaking with everyone. Another good you mentioned was just the camaraderie of the evening program. I will 100% agree with that, especially being able to take evening classes and day classes comparing. So like I kind of already mentioned, usually if you're in the evening program, it's for a reason and you're trying to get in, get out, just be done with it. So there were a lot of times someone's like, hey, my daughter has a piano recital, or hey, I have to travel for work. Do you mind if I get your notes? No problem. Don't know how good they'll be, but no problem. Like, it's not your fault. You have to miss it. Whereas with the full time, I've heard crazy stories where people will either flat out say no, or they're purposely giving you terrible notes. Like, it's just crazy. You have to have a personal friend to trust them to get their notes. Whereas with the evening program, it wasn't that at all. I've also heard this is a mixture between hearing from students and professors that the conversation's a little bit better. Maybe that also goes back to we're here for a reason. So I'm going to work a little bit harder. Like, I'm having these conversations. I'm here at night, like, I'm going to make the best of it. So we're engaging with the professors. We're asking follow-up questions. We're posing hypothetical questions. We're doing a lot more that sometimes you don't see as much in the daytime. I feel like we received a lot of respect from our professors, going back to, you're crazy for doing this anyway. So clearly you have the hustle in you. So there's a lot of good. I feel like in hindsight, it's better for someone if you know a little bit about the legal community before you go into it. I personally wouldn't suggest it so if I was speaking to myself 4 years ago, I wouldn't suggest it. I'd say, hey, if this is something you want to do, go full time into it. Or figure out what do you want your end goal to be, and immediately go into career services and say, hey, this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to do. Even if it's I want to practice in Texas, or if I want to practice in New York, that's where I'm going to practice. That's not an option. So I need to figure out what classes I need to take. I need to figure out what law firms I should apply to. Of course, schools usually push the firms in the area. No, I don't want that. This is what I want. So that's what I would suggest. If you are doing an evening program, go into it with a clear-cut path, and that'll help cut out some of the issues that I had. Like I mentioned, I didn't know what questions to ask. But had I did a little bit better planning at the very beginning, it would have been a little better. Also, I feel like I mentioned, if you're already working for a company and you're just transitioning to that legal department, that'll be good as well, just because you're probably not caring as much about networking opportunities or different type of legal jobs because you already have your job secured. Also, if you have a parent or a close family friend that's in the legal community, whether they're an attorney, a judge, a paralegal, someone that can tell you this is what a typical schedule looks like, these are the different things you need to look for. But just going into it, not having anyone, I wouldn't recommend, and that's what led to a lot of my bad. So I don't know. Hopefully I touched on a lot of different things from that list.
I mean, I think you did pretty good. I was definitely going to ask you at some point if this was you now talking to you then, if you would recommend it. So I guess not.
No. Especially because I wanted to transition completely out of retail.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was doing a huge career change. And so I would have benefited from networking a little bit more than I did, or even just being more comfortable and learning more, connecting with another student. Like, hey, you're interested in intellectual property, so am I. What are you doing? Oh, that's a good idea. I didn't really have that. So I wouldn't recommend it if I really had to do it. Like I said, I would have really sat down, made a clear cut plan from the very beginning, and then just said, hey, this is what I need from you. Because sometimes I feel like with career services and just different departments, I'm sure they mean well, but they're only going to give you the answers to the questions you ask. So if I don't have a question, you're not giving me an answer, if that makes sense.
Fact.
So yeah,
Hard fact.
they were helpful as they knew how to be, I guess, but they didn't really help a lot. I wish some people came to our classes more and said, hey, heads up, these different things are occurring later on in the year, whether you could take some time off, try to reschedule, just do different things like that. I wish we had more conversations like that. But I was able to do clinics and different things like that, because I know you mentioned that was a bad side too. It depends on where you work and how flexible your schedule is. So for me, I was always off at least one day in the week. So I'd just work a longer day in the clinic on my off day for my full-time job. Or there are certain people, their company is super understanding. They'll let them take lesser hours for that semester or different things to work it out. So I know a few people that they were able to do like the clinics and different things like that. And then of course, if you have an opportunity and you're ready, you can always quit your job. So
now that's real. I mean, we're not advising anybody to just like jump ship or whatever, but I mean,
no,
it's an option, right? Like
not
it
at all.
It is.
Not at all. But yeah.
But I find it interesting though, because I think that's a great way to debunk a myth that's out there. I didn't know that there was the opportunity to, but it makes sense, like do the clinics if you know, like you have the schedule and things. So to that point, outside of clinics, I know a lot of people like go to law school. Well, okay, rephrase. A lot of people who know what law school is and like the depth of it, right? So like have lawyers in the family, all that other stuff. Journal. And I think I almost bring up this damn topic almost every other episode at this point because you know you get the mixed reviews, right? Did you have the opportunity to do journal? Did you know what journal was? And do you feel like you missed out if you didn't?
I did know what journal was. I did not participate in journal. I'm kind of 50-50 with whether I wish I did or didn't. I do feel like it's been a little bit of a struggle when going for interviews or applying for jobs because I have a little bit different of a resume compared to someone else. So I feel like having those traditional things such as a journal would have definitely helped when interviewing. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. It wasn't something that I personally wanted to do. But I do know a lot of people do it strictly for the resume portion of it. And even to go a little bit further, I've developed relationships with certain recruiters and diversity board members from firms, and they're even understanding of the fact that, like, hey, some of the practices we have for hiring are a little antiquated, but it just is what it is. Like, it's kind of hard to break this machine that's been going for hundreds of years or whatever. So sometimes I'm able to run into people, they're like, hey, you didn't do journal or you didn't do whatever, but you were a manager for X amount of years. You literally had hundreds of people underneath you. So clearly you know how to act in a professional setting, you know how to handle stress, different things of that nature. So there were a lot of things that I developed from my job. But yeah, like sometimes people aren't looking into that. They're looking for the journal. So
I just want to always throw it out there. Journal is a choice of the body. So choose wisely if you want
choose
to
wisely.
go through that. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to get a little bit more in depth into Brooke's opportunities, how she landed where she currently is now, and how she chose the school that she did. So we'll be right back in a hot second. All right. And we're back. Almost done with the episode. We appreciate you guys for sticking with us. Brooke has been amazing so far, dropping gems. So make sure you all are actually listening, paying attention, and letting us know what you think, right? So we've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot of ground, right, Brooke? And I think something that's really important to touch on in terms of at least your experience and something that you can offer students is in your program that things look different for you. And I think one thing that is different is networking. We talked about it in terms of you feel like you didn't get this opportunity, and whether it was like a daytime panel or something like that, or you know, with career services being in certain hours, you didn't get the opportunity to do this, that, and the third, but you did make connections with recruiters and things. So talk to the people a little bit about what your process was, because you might have had to do a little bit more than what a traditional student did in order to make up that gap.
For sure. So what I did, like you mentioned, there were a lot of panels I couldn't go to that were during the day, but one I will commend. I feel like my whole class and even the classes that have come after me, we were advocates for ourselves, and we would speak out like, hey, we see a lot of these amazing things going on during the day. Can you offer some of this in the evening? It'll not only benefit ourselves, but also the people that you're having on the panel. They have full-time jobs. Like, let them work their job and then come here afterwards. So I will say, although it wasn't there as much within like my first year or so, by the time I graduated, we did have a lot of opportunities. We had a lot of panels in the evening, just because, like I said, we spoke up about that. And then even, I'm sure you're aware, a lot of firms, they have their happy hour events that are sometimes in the evening as well. So you're able to go to that. Yeah, relieve yourself from the stresses of work and then also networks. There were definitely opportunities. I kind of touched on it before, like you can kind of maneuver your schedule for what you really want to do. So if there's a specific panel on a sector of law that you just have to go to, talk to your boss to see if you can take that off or just request that day off, request a half day. You know, I definitely took some of my vacation days to use it for school. I also, at least with me at the particular time, because I was salaried in my role, like I was able to move a little bit around with, hey, I'm coming in later, I'll work later. So sometimes I was able to go to those daytime panels. So it's all about what you make it. It's funny because my last year of school, I actually did decide to leave work to take 100% opportunity of networking opportunities, just different things in the legal community. And my last year was the pandemic. So left work for all the networking, and that kind of came to a halt. So I just became obsessed with LinkedIn, even more so than what I was at the time. But that definitely sucked. But I say that because a lot of people in the evening program, not a lot, maybe half or a little less, they do end up leaving their full-time career, whether it's they take another role that's a little bit less demanding, or maybe they were able to get an opportunity with a law firm. And so they begin working there as a paralegal for the rest of the time, whatever it takes. But yeah, so like I said, we were able to go to some day panels by moving different things around. We were able to network in that way. Also, just with me being vocal with career services, this is what I'm interested in. They made sure to put me in contact with certain recruiters. Not to get too much in the details, but I had a weird situation happen where I was in the system a little bit weird for a while. So because I was in my third year, but I was a 2L, I was keyed as a 3L. So for a while, I was getting the wrong information. And so I think because of that, they kind of made up for it by like, okay, hey, we'll introduce you directly to these recruiters. We can explain what occurred. Like, it wasn't your fault. You missed whatever type of deadline. And so through that, even though I didn't get positions with those particular firms, I just forged relationships with those different recruiters or with the people specifically on the diversity panel, going back to them having the conversation and realizing we're missing out on a lot of potential talent that's probably in the evening program because we're using a lot of these antiquated ways of recruiting. And your example is one of them. Like, we could have missed out on potentially speaking to you. So I think by just me being vocal, that's how I was able to still network. I wish I would have done more networking, but that goes just specifically to my story because I wanted to transition completely out of my area. But that doesn't apply to a lot of people that are in the evening program. I know a lot of people that are 110% satisfied with how they did it and the results that they received. So,
I mean, but still, like, all great points, especially as, and I find it funny, right? Like, as future lawyers, we have a hard time sometimes advocating for ourselves. And it's so interesting
right.
to me because, like, we'll sit in the court. Some people will sit in the courtroom all day long and advocate for a client, but when it comes to like us and what we need, we're just like, oh, you know, I'll just, it's fine, it's okay, all right. So I do agree. For anybody who's interested in like part time, make sure that you are vocal if your needs aren't being met. But then also network with students who potentially are in like those daytime programs, either it's daytime, part time, or full-time students. You know, just getting that information that you might be missing, because like Brooke said, she wouldn't have known unless she opened her mouth. And I think that's half the battle, actually opening our mouths and communicating. So Brooke, you talked about like the networking, the whole aspect. How did you land where you are now in terms of your job and securing that? Because, you know, you talked a little bit about not knowing that first semester grades were like this monster of an effect on the legal career and your journey through, but you are working employed at a small size firm, medium size
Yes,
firm.
small size.
Okay, all right.
You.
What was that, like small? I think it's small. Just go with small size firm. But yeah, how did that journey go for you to get to where you are today?
So to start, like I said, I originally went to law school for intellectual property. And so I feel like and you touch on this a lot in your episodes, schools always push big law, or they push these specific things, or they push the law firms in your area. So I feel like for a long time, I mean, I was applying to what they told me, so I didn't really know anything else. And so, interesting enough, I'm currently practicing civil litigation, which surprisingly I enjoy. But the way I came about this position was I was very humbled, to be honest. Like I mentioned, graduating during the pandemic was not fun at all. I did not have a job secured. And so I was pressed, panicking, studying for the bar, but still it's like I want to have a job eventually. And so it got to the point where I was just applying to literally anything, whether it was a part-time role, whether it was a clerk at a firm. I just need to get my foot in the door somewhere. And then if a position comes from that, great. So I was looking at my school's listserv and I was just applying to a bunch of those things. And my supervisor now had reached out to me. I applied to a part-time role for him. And he said, hey, you know, like, I'm sure as you could see from the website, like our firm is a little bit smaller. I was thinking in the future of getting a full-time associate on, but right now, like that might not be a good fit. But just from you alone applying for this, I see the hustle in you. Like, I want to give you the opportunity to work here as the part-time clerk that you applied for. So, okay, cool, great. And so I started working there as this part-time clerk and just trying to absorb everything I could. And so right around like 2-3 weeks or so, I reached out to him for feedback. And that kind of goes back into my professional background. I'm used to getting feedback. Like I'm not really afraid of it. So tell me what I'm doing. So if I'm doing it wrong, I don't keep doing it until you just get annoyed with me. I reached out to him. Hey, like I know you might be pretty busy, but at the end of Friday, can we sit down and just go over the different projects I've had and how I'm doing? And so, pleasantly surprised, I wasn't expecting it in that moment, but he offered me my full-time role. He said, you know, you've been doing really amazing. I wasn't looking for a full-time associate at the time, but I think you're worth it. And he said it would benefit him a lot, which it would, because easy cases in court or via Zoom or whatever, I can do that as a licensed attorney. So that's more he can be focused on. And so, that's how I got the role. I just applied to a clerk position. Like the pandemic has humbled a lot of people, including myself.
Well, look, let me tell you, and I'm trying to tell people now. I think this was an episode ago, 2 episodes ago. This is what I get for taking so long of a break. We were talking about that. The pandemic is going to change a lot of what people apply for, and it really is going to bring out the hustle in you in terms of what are you willing to do to then get to like your ultimate end goal of a job. You might have to start somewhere else, get the experience, and then hopefully when the economy is better, when the world opens up, when people actually wear their masks, we will be in a better opportunity for people to get like these different jobs and then transition and move across, and having a unique skill set or an ability to at least have something in your background in the interim, I think is important. So hats off to you and congratulations. How is practice now compared to what, you know, I don't get to talk to a lot of actual attorneys on the show yet, but what do you think the main difference is between what you've learned in the classroom studying for the bar versus what you actually do day to day?
Well, specifically for the pandemic, it's been very interesting. Of course, most, if not all, court appearances are via Zoom. So it's actually really funny to watch because depending on the type of case you have, if you're familiar with the way the courtroom works, sometimes there are multiple people that are in the room just to hear their case, whether it's to get a continuous, whether it's a motion for summary judgment, whatever the case may be. So imagine now all these people are on a Zoom call. You always got to say I can't hear you. You're on mute. Or these judges who aren't accustomed to Zoom and now they're having to be their clerks popping in and out helping. So I will say it's kind of lessened the stress. It's like, okay, we're all human. This is a little bit easier, but it's just been really funny to watch. For me specifically, I feel like the classroom has taught you just a lot about how to do things by the book. This is how you write a pleading. This is how you write a motion for summary judgment. But it's just a lot different in general, whether the pandemic or no pandemic. It's just different to actually have to apply that to life. There's no way you're going to memorize all of these different rules. So be comfortable with either researching it or asking, hey, so what am I supposed to be doing? How many references to cases would you like? So that's been an adjustment, but like I said, I'm not afraid of the feedback. So I don't care to ask questions. Let me make sure I know what you want from me so I can do it right the first time. And we just have to make small amendments versus this is not what I asked for at all. I've heard horror stories about that. Even my boss, to lessen the stress on me, he told me about his first year and how he spent all day on a specific project, turned it into his boss and was like, I didn't ask for this. So I can't bill for any of this. Like, thanks. And that happens. That happens in your first year. So yeah, I don't think a lot of what I've experienced has been affected by the pandemic. It's just different because more things are virtual now. I will say for me, a benefit with being in a smaller firm, I'm able to absorb a lot more. I've heard a lot of people like once you get into these big atmospheres and you're just churning for the billable hours, you don't really have time to create a mentorship type of relationship and get real feedback. It's just either this is right, this is wrong, here's your next product. I'm able to sit down and say like, okay, not only is this right or wrong, but this is why. This is what's normally done. This is what's my preference versus this is the law. So I am happy that I did land at a small firm for my first time practicing.
Love that. You got me a little nervous now, but it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
No, people do great.
Fine. I'm just ready to graduate, to be honest with you. I'm just ready to get the hell out. We can figure everything else out.
Exactly.
It's cool. It's cool. But we've talked a lot about, I think we've talked around it without actually talking about it, but not every school offers a part-time program, whether it's daytime, evening time, whatever may have you. So for you, what was the process like of looking for in the admissions process a part-time school, and then what factors played into you choosing SLU at the end of the day?
So because I was already working full time in St. Louis, I knew I wasn't ready to leave that position at the time. So I had to find a school that I could commute to. So already that kind of filters out what 99.9% of schools. Even Mizzou, I'm not commuting 2 hours for that. Although I do know some people, I don't know, maybe if their job is part-time, I've heard wasn't an option for me. So that kind of brought it down to WashU and SLU, to be honest. WashU doesn't have a part-time evening program. At least when I applied, they didn't. They do have some type of legal studies certificate, but I was explained the difference between that and how that's one, not a law degree. And then if you do decide to get a law degree, you're going to have to retake all those classes. You can't like transfer their certificate. It's kind of fuzzy because it was 4 years ago, but either way, with the person saying that to me, it was like, okay, I'm just going to go full into law school because I don't want to waste my time with the certificate and then I have to do it over again. And so, like I said, SLU was the only school within the area that offers a part-time evening program, I believe. So the decision was kind of made for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's not bad. I do think it's like things to consider since, and then I also think, which is also a fortunate part for at least where you were in life before deciding to go back, is like the city aspect. You were in a quote unquote major city. Um, Hey, look, I'm trying not to bash St. Louis, and I'm gonna let it be a major city because a lot of people think St. Louis is a major city. So cool. St. Louis is a major city for the context of this conversation, compared to like Columbia, at least, where it's small, weird, and everything else in between. So you were in a city where you had probably a little bit more access, and then you were familiar with it, so you were a little bit more comfortable in terms of okay, I know I have to leave my job at this time in order to get to class or like whatever may have you. A lot of people, I think, in the admissions process, something to think about is location, because I think that also plays into your opportunities too. Because let's say you ended up in a rural town area for law school for some reason, part-time at any point, depending on what like you're looking for long term, you may not have as much access as to somebody who's doing a part-time program in a bigger city like St. Louis, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, so on and so forth. So things to think about. Something also I found interesting on the internet is that for part-time students in the admissions process, it's a little lighter for them in terms of what is more forgivable to an admissions committee. And the first thing that the article talked about, I think it was US Weekly or US News, whatever they're calling themselves these days, the one that ranks all the law schools. They were talking about how in the admissions process for part-time students, one thing that is quickly or a little bit more favorably looked at is if you have like a lower GPA coming in, or if you have like a lower LSAT score or somewhere in the combination, because like it's the combination that counts in the admissions process anyway. Those things are a little bit more forgivable as a part-time student because one, they get it. You're about to be busy as hell anyway, right? So it's something that's like, oh, okay, this may have been what happened, but we can forgive it, figure it out later. But then, like you were talking about, if the school does offer part-time scholarships, that is still something that they consider for scholarship. So at least for you, since you didn't have to go through the whole city-wide search of where you wanted to go because you wanted to stay with your job, do you feel, or at least looking back on your admissions process now, that you had to dig deeper to for your application process, like making sure, because you and I are kind of the same. I also study for the LSAT on a whim without any tutoring. Highly do not recommend to anybody.
No.
Do what you got to do, but don't do that. So I feel like there were areas where I had to make up, like my GPA from undergrad necessarily wasn't the best because biochemistry is a shit show, but it wasn't the best, but I had, like the offset. So do you feel like looking back on your admissions packet where you were at that time, there were things that you were like, probably could have waited, probably could have done this a little better, those different tandem things?
To be perfectly honest, I don't have much experience with that because, like I said, I kind of only had this one school as an option for me, unless I was going to do a lot of major changes. So I had what I had. This is my GPA. This is my resume at the time. I submitted it. Unfortunately, I was able to get in. I have had friends that, we just talk about our journeys as we get close. And I do have a friend, she had to take the LSAT a few times before she was admitted to the part-time program. So I don't know what her score was in comparison. So that's something like, I can't really say like, oh, well, they let me in because it was the evening program compared to if I was full-time, they wouldn't have. I think that kind of goes more into the school itself. If I was applying to a more known school or an Ivy League, I don't think it would have mattered whether it was evening or not with my GPA. So Harvard would have said no, regardless. So, but like I said, I can't really speak too much of that because I didn't apply to multiple schools to get that different feedback. I applied, I got in. So
true. Well, guys, we're near the end of the episode. Like I said, Brooke has been a major godsend in terms of this conversation that I didn't even think about having. This was actually her idea, so I can't even take the credit. I have to give a hats off to her for this one. As we're ending the episode, Brooke, I gotta ask if you could give a piece of advice. Oh, this is actually gonna be the first time this question will be different for anybody. If you can give a piece of advice to a pre-law student, what would it be? And then what would your advice be to any part-time student, whether it is daytime or evening, going to law school currently?
A huge piece of advice I'd give to anyone, but especially pre-law, start to make these connections now. Even see if you can find someone that you can shadow, because this is a huge commitment and it'll just benefit you just in the long run. If you have connections already going into it, you're going to know to look for those specific things that, like I said, for myself, I took a little bit longer to figure out. So just, definitely don't be afraid to network. I feel like also reaching out to admissions and career services even before you're admitted, that can be an option. If you're a minority in one way or another, so me being a Black woman, I would recommend to another Black woman who's a pre-law student, reach out to the director of diversity. They might have other opportunities underneath their belt, other scholarships that aren't listed on the website, but that's their job to, specifically help you in this diverse community. So reach out to them, and usually they're going to be a great source. I know our director at SLU Law, she came my last year, but she was a godsend. I loved Belinda Dantley, and she made me feel so comfortable with the questions that I had graduating, that I feel like, should these have already been answered? Should I still have these insecurities? So reach out and make those connections. Advice that I'd give to a current student would be, I kind of touched on this earlier, but try to figure out what you want your overall path to be and sit down and have that conversation. Whether it's, okay, I've already completed this first year, these are the classes I have, what classes do I need to take? What GPA do I need? Because if you want to get into big law, GPA is very important. Maybe you want to switch up the classes you would have taken and take a class that's considered boring to you, but it's going to be a GPA booster. Like, hey, you got to do what you got to do. So really sit down, figure out what do I want to do and what do I need to do to achieve that goal. If big law is your goal, you got a lot of things you're going to do. We touched on journal, possibly doing a clinic, explore outside of the city that you're in. But if you want to do public law, it might be a little bit, I guess, easier, which I don't want to say, but you know what I mean, as far as GPA, different things like that. But it's a little bit more networking sometimes. So just try to get a plan going.
Drop spike. All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of How to Get Away with the JD. We are 3 episodes away now from the end of the season, and I think the final lineup is going to be pretty interesting for you guys in terms of what we're talking about and who will be on the show. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you to Brooke for stopping by. This is How to Get Away with the JD. Make sure if you have Apple Podcasts, make sure you rate and comment. And then if you're on Spotify, YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to not miss any more content from the rest of the season and run the previous season back. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.